Down here for the Labour Party in the Southwest. As a party member, I've been living down here for nearly 20 years. I know we are as radical in this part of Britain as any other part of Britain, which is why we're gathering together tonight. So let's make tonight not just a special occasion, but something that we build on and we take forward. And we get Labour MPs in this region of England as well as across the rest of the country. It's my great pleasure and honour tonight to introduce a man who could be Prime Minister by Christmas, the way we're going. So give it up for the absolute bloke, Jeremy Corbyn, yeah!
Hi, evening all. Good evening, North Devon. Is Labour going to win in North Devon? Then my work is done. Billy, thank you very much for that introduction. And I want to say to Billy, thank you not just for what you've done tonight, but what you've done for music, radical ideas and radical music during all of your life. The way you've travelled the world, reigniting enthusiasm for music of all sorts, from Woody Guthrie in the United States to folk music in England, in Scotland, in Wales, Ireland and so many other places, and the way in which you brought together the combination of the musical spirit and experience that's there with all of us, with that analysis of the radical history of this country. It isn't all just the history of kings and queens. It's the history of farm workers that stood up against injustice. It's those that fought and campaigned for pensions and those that stood up for environmental sustainability. And what Billy encapsulates is so much of that rich tradition. And I just want to say, Billy, thanks for everything you do and keep on doing it. This morning I was down at Glastonbury, and it was a bit strange going there. Do you know what? There was nobody on the field whatsoever, apart from one solitary sheep that was staring at the pyramid stage, which was just a sort of gaunt, almost like a sort of statue of itself kind of thing. And I went there to meet the wonderful Michael Eavis and to at his invitation, open a new housing development that he has built, or that has been built in the area, called Margaret Bonfield Close. Margaret Bonfield was a woman Labour MP who was the first Labour woman cabinet minister in 1929, was Minister of Education, started out as a shop worker in Brighton, where she was appalled at the way she was treated and her colleagues were treated. And as she's going home one evening from work, she stops to get a fish and chips supper, and she's finished eating the fish and chips, and she starts doing this with the newspaper they were wrapped in, and then sees an advertisement to join the Shop Workers Union. And on that basis, she joined the union, campaigned for regulation of hours, limited hours of work for shop workers and better wages, and eventually became Deputy General Secretary of the Union before the age of 30. Remember that, working class girl, working in a shop, did all that at a time when women didn't even have the vote. These are the pioneers that we must be inspired by and understand their history, their contribution, and how we can build on that and make things better for the next generation, rather than predicting a generation of impoverishment on impoverishment on impoverishment. Surely what we're about is transformation of our lives and world. And what has been done with this housing development is provision of permanent tenancies, secure, affordable, social rent level, lifetime tenancies. That's got to be brilliant. That's what it should be about. And we need housing development, not just in Pilton in Somerset because Michael Eavis has the vision and the ability to make sure it happens. We need that all across the southwest. It cannot just be an economy that relies solely on tourism, second homes. There's got to be a whole investment-led economy. And what I was talking to Michael and others about was the regeneration of rural economies through better transport links, proper, efficient, effective broadband connection all across, and investment in new industries and jobs so that rural areas become places of economic growth again, and village life is re-strengthened, because that way we can keep the schools that we need, keep the post offices we need, and build that strength of community in rural areas. Labour is a party for the whole country, not just for urban areas such as I'm privileged to represent in Parliament. And I want to say a huge thank you to all of you that campaigned in the general election, that delivered the best result we'd had for a very long time in North Devon, and we're now the party in second place all across the county of Devon. How we gained a seat in Plymouth, how we held our seat with a huge majority in Exeter, how we gained in Bristol. We're the party of growing support all over the southwest. I'm very proud of that. It's your achievement, and it's going to be our achievement when we win council seats, when we get more Labour MPs elected, and those Labour MPs elected become part of the quantum leap to get a Labour government in Britain. So I want you to thank Mark Cann for his work as the candidate in the last few general elections and the incredible contribution he makes to political life all over Devon, of carrying the flag for social justice and our party. Now, politics is changing a lot in Britain, and it's indeed changing a lot all over the world. If we as a party can't offer an alternative to austerity, an alternative to an economic model that has patently failed to deliver for the majority of people, that has given this country lower wages in real terms than there were before the financial crash, has given us more homeless people than I can remember for many, many decades, given young people a massive level of debt for having the temerity to want to get a university education, and the lack of social care for so many older people who need and deserve it, then you have to say there's something fundamentally wrong with that economic model. I am absolutely fed up with those who work in the local government sector, in the health sector, social care sector, getting lower pay, lower wages and less security because they are paying the price of the banking crisis of 2007. They were not the ones who caused it. They were absolutely not the ones who caused that crisis, and they're paying the price for it. And so we've been through the years of opposition after 2010. We've seen what 7 years of austerity has done, firstly with the Tories and Liberals in cahoots with each other, then the Tories on their own for a very short time, and now the Tories with the DUP, carrying on with essentially the same policies and the same process. And so when we reached the point after a couple of years of a general election in 2017, I'll be quite honest, none of us knew what date it was going to come, and none of us were completely expecting that election. But you remember the atmosphere on the day the election was called. Every commentator, every TV channel and every newspaper could find were lined up on those late night chat shows on Sky, BBC, Channel 4, ITV and so on, all saying, Labour hasn't got a chance, Labour hasn't got a prayer, Labour's finished, let's think about the future. And they carried on with that narrative. The election was called, I remember it very well, and people said to me, okay, what are you going to do now? I said, well, go out and campaign. What else is there to do? And well, Well, people in my office often get quite annoyed with me, with actually ample justification and total good reason, and I've got every sympathy with every annoyance they ever have. And they said, well, okay, we've lined up all these meetings for you this afternoon. I said, well, that's very nice of you, but unfortunately I won't be at any of them. They said, well, you've got to be, an election's call. I said, no, I promised to go and meet 100 carers in Birmingham, and that's where I'm going, to meet those carers and talk to them, and we'll do the rest of the business on the phone and get on with it, because we've got to be out there talking to and getting the ideas from the people that it's our privilege to represent. And as the election campaign began to get underway, we showed how strong we are as a party, because within 4 days of it being called, we got events on all over the country, and we got 1 million leaflets delivered in one day on the Saturday after the election was called. We were still getting panned in the press, we were still getting panned by all the experts, but out there was a totally different story. And I want to say a huge thank you to all of those people that went out there straight away to do the campaigning work, but also all those that went online, went to colleges, went to schools, went to factories, went around getting people to register to vote. We got 2 million people more on the electoral register in 3 weeks from when the election campaign was called. That didn't happen by accident. Thank you to all of you that worked so hard on that particular campaign. And then we started on the campaign trail all around the country. I did 100 events all around Britain, and we did a combination of public rallies as well as discussion meetings as well as a huge online campaign. The online campaign was very effective. The most powerful thing that happened was our manifesto, for the many, not the few. That was written in 2 weeks by a very dedicated team of people from my office and our party head office. And the fundamental message, the narrative, the strong golden thread that ran all the way through it was, we cannot go on with politics as they are and as they were. If we, the Labour Party, we, the Labour movement, can't offer some hope and some vision of a world of greater justice and greater equality, a world of peace, a world of democracy, a world of human rights, and huge hope and opportunity for young people, then what do we exist for? And so that manifesto set out that vision of how Britain could be and how we could operate within the world. And I've never forgotten the day that we launched the manifesto. Actually, it had been leaked to the press, as you know. And when I was told it had been leaked, I was really angry about it. I thought, oh my God, is nothing safe? Is nothing sacred? I'm sitting there in my room at home, talking to the cat about it, saying, who leaked the manifesto? It definitely wasn't El Gato. Definitely wasn't. And it was wrong, and it should never have been leaked. But, do you know what happened? They started off condemning it, and then within a few days, the popular support for public ownership of water, of Royal Mail, of rail network services, of community ownership, of energy companies, all of that began to change the narrative and change the discussion. And we launched the manifesto in Bradford. Why Bradford? Bradford was the place that the Independent Labour Party was founded, which was a forerunner of the Labour Party, the place that Barbara Castle and Vic Feather came from, the place that's so rich and steeped in Labour traditions. So we launched it in Bradford, and it took us a long time to get out of the university at the end of it, because so many students were crushing to get in to listen to the launch of our manifesto and wanted to talk about it and get copies of it and so on. It became the talking point. And then we took our bus off to Colne Valley and lots of places, speaking to rallies, getting that message out there. And all the while, the media, the print media are condemning us, the experts are saying it's all over, and the so-called strength and stability of what the Tory party was doing unravelled before your very eyes, as they couldn't even put forward a coherent policy on social care, and their refusal to take part in debate anywhere, whereas we are very happy to talk to anybody, anytime, any place. You'd be amazed at the number of debates and discussions I've on trains all over the country every single day. And I tell you what, it's very instructive and very informative, because that's what it's about. And if I turn around, there should be a bottle of water here. Strong and stable local water, it's fine. And the campaign then gave us a result which was 3 million more votes for Labour in the general election, an increase in the number of seats, the highest vote in England since 1970, and the biggest swing to Labour since 1945. We did very well. We did very well to get so far, but we didn't go quite far enough. We didn't win the election. And so we do two things now. One is we challenge them in Parliament, challenge them all the way. And so they've rolled out universal credit to 8% of the people that are ultimately going to be on universal credit. And you know, 20% of those people that receive universal credit are not getting what they want, not getting it when they need it, and are suffering as a result. People have lost their homes, children are going hungry, people are in a desperate state because of the sheer incompetence and inefficiency of central government in rolling this thing out. The majority are worse off as a result of going on to universal credit. Many people are utterly desperate as a result of it. We challenge them on the rollout. We challenge them on many of the principles behind their whole benefits policy. And we challenge them on something so obvious as the rather ill-named DWP helpline, where you had to pay 55 pence a minute for the privilege of phoning them up. After a week, they dropped that one. But we're not done yet. We're not done yet. We will challenge them all the way on that. And the strange thing is, in Parliament, it's now a sort of Tory party in abdication, because we have now had votes on European Union nationals before the general election, right to remain in Britain. Tory party didn't turn up and didn't vote. Boris Johnson rather bizarrely voted with us that EU nationals should be given the rights of permanent residence in Britain. I was quite concerned for him when I saw him in our lobby. So I'm a generous person. So I went up and said, Boris, are you sure you know what you're doing? He said, I don't know, old boy, it's all a bit complicated, isn't it? Okay, all right, okay, Boris, that's fine, that's all right. And then that went through with hardly any opposition. We then challenged them on NHS pay cap, didn't turn up to vote. We challenged them on the increase in student fees, which they then said was going to be frozen after they had risen by so much. And then we challenged them on universal credit, where we called a vote, made sure there was a vote. 299 MPs voted to pause universal credit, 0 voted the other way. So what's the will of Parliament? Pretty obvious to me what the will of Parliament is. You cannot have a government whose majority in Parliament relies on MPs who are not prepared to turn up and vote to defend their own policies. And that's only a few months since the general election, 4 months since the general election. The other thing we're doing is campaigning all around the country. I've set myself the target of going to every single one of the marginal constituencies, England, Scotland and Wales. Now, I've been to 53 constituencies already since July, all around the country. And those events are a combination of meetings, talking to people, but also a lot of time listening to people, listening to their views, listening to their interests, listening to their ideas of what we can do as a party. And it's fascinating. And it's amazing that strength that's there within our party. And so we campaign all over. There's a budget coming up on November the 22nd. To be quite honest, I don't have very high hopes of this budget. I really don't. I saw Philip Hammond, he didn't look a happy man. Mind you, he never looks a happy man. And, you know, I don't know. One doesn't wish to be personal, so whatever. They're going to produce a budget. I want all of you to commit now. For the 25th of November is our next national campaigning day. The last one we did, after the party conference, we had 450 events all around the country. Amazingly well supported, street campaigns, public meetings, rallies, door knocking, discussion groups. It can be anything that engages people into politics, into a different vision of what politics can be about. That's what it's about. And I want there to be even more than that on November the 25th. So please organise events in your own communities, organise events everywhere, and we'll do all the work we can to get it on the national media the night before. Make it our day to challenge this government. Is this country to go forward to greater poverty, greater injustice, greater inequality, greater levels of enormous wealth up there, and more people sleeping on the street down here? Or are we to do things differently? Tax those up there, that those down here can benefit, and those who need it get the education, the housing, the health service, and the social services that they need. It is about bringing people together, and that's what we, as a campaign, want to do, and I want you all to be ready to join into that. And we're challenging them on everything. They're supposed to be negotiating Brexit after the results of the EU referendum. You've got 3 people negotiating Brexit who apparently don't even speak to each other. It must be quite complicated. And it must be very complicated sitting on the other side of the table when you don't know what's coming from Britain on this. I want there to be tariff-free trade with Europe. We're not going to set up a Donald Trump-style tax haven on the shores of Europe. We're not going to be a party to driving down wages in a deregulated economy, deregulation of environmental conditions, consumer conditions and workers' rights. We're going to do something very, very different. That's why I went to Brussels last Thursday to speak to our friends and our comrades all across Europe, both in the European Union and outside the European Union, about the need for unity of all of the socialist and left parties against austerity and against the politics of neoliberalism that we've had for the past 40 years across Europe. And told them how we wanted to work with them to achieve that, and that we will be challenging this government all the way on this. There's a lot more work to do on this, but we are absolutely committed to doing it and carrying on with that campaign. But it's also about developing our policies, both our vision internationally and our vision nationally. The other point I made was that there's been a frightening rise in the far right all across Europe. The results of the elections in Hungary, in the Czech Republic, in Austria, in Germany, in the Netherlands, and the frighteningly high vote got by Marine Le Pen and her fascists in France. It's very, very serious and very, very dangerous. The narrative of those right parties is always to blame somebody, usually a refugee, a minority, a linguistic or an ethnic minority, for the problems that we all face, never facing up to the reality of it as a systemic problem that has to be fixed by redistribution of wealth. And on the back of that, they've gained some support out of desperation. Blaming refugees, who are human beings, just like you, just like me, who've got into a terrible situation not of their own making. Let's hold out a hand to refugees. Let's have sharing of our ability to support those refugees and not go down this vile road of blame culture against people who themselves are victims of war and oppression. And you know, with every refugee there's a human story. I've been in many refugee camps over the years and talked to refugees about what their life is like, and I've never forgotten going to a camp on the border between Iraq and Syria. This is before the current war in Syria, broke out. I met a group of people who were stuck there. They couldn't get either way. They couldn't go back to Iraq. They couldn't get into Syria. And we went there to meet them and support them, and eventually there was a good outcome to it. I was talking to a family in a tent where some of the children had died because the tent had caught fire and they couldn't get out because the plastic burns very, very quickly. Awful way to die. Terrible. I was talking to this girl, probably about 14. I said to her, "What's your ambitions?" Think of this, 14-year-old girl in a tent, in the desert, in winter, can't go one way, can't go the other, and she's lost some of her siblings in a fire. It's a pretty terrible situation to be in. And I said, "What's your ambition?" She said, "You know what? I want to be a doctor." How good is that? That she showed to me what the strength of human spirit is. And we should embrace that as human beings. That means support for the refugee camps in Lebanon and in Libya. It also means bringing about a political solution to the wars in Syria and in other places, but also a foreign policy based on human rights and justice, because that has to be the right way forward, a foreign policy of peace for the future. And I say that because I think it's important to put that in the context of the way the right parties are operating all across Europe. But it's also what we say as the people of this country. How are we going to go forward? Is it credible that we go on underfunding our schools, charging our children for going to college, charging students for going to university, charging adults for going into adult education courses, underfunding nurseries, not providing the 30 hours that I think should be there for all 2 to 4-year-olds, and proper funding of schools, and an arts pupil premium for all schools, that all children may learn music and art and understand the sense of their creativity and their imagination. And is it right that we have a National Health Service that's under such pressure, with wages frozen, posts frozen, huge vacancy level all through the National Health Service, partly because they can't recruit them because there hasn't been enough training done, and partly because it's a way of saving money, which means people wait longer for operations, the stress levels get greater and greater. A grotesquely underfunded mental health service that means that many people suffer, and some sadly take their own lives as a result of that suffering. And a social care system that is in crisis, with more than 1 million people not getting the social care that they deserve. How is this fixed? Well, quite simply, it's largely about money and investment. Investment in training so that nurses don't have to borrow money to become nurses. Instead, we welcome them into our NHS to be nurses in our NHS and don't charge them for the privilege. And it's about a system of taxation that doesn't constantly give money away to the very wealthy into tax write-offs, inheritance tax write-offs, and all the other things the Tories are so good at doing, and at the same time punishing those that rely on the public services to survive. And so I'm quite clear about it. A Labour government will tax more to the top 5% in order that the rest may be able to lead better lives. Because it is about the kind of society and kind of world that we want to live in. And the housing strategy is simply non-existent. And I must say the Tories seem to be very confused about this, because we've been calling for a big investment in housing. Yes, it requires borrowing. That's what the Labour government did at the end of the Second World War, was borrowed to invest. And as a result of that, we got housing, we got a National Health Service, we got an education service. And John McDonnell has made it very clear, we will not borrow through the PFI principle, we will instead borrow in a sensible way that isn't such a rip-off to our public sector. So we borrow to invest, and we set up a national investment bank to achieve all those kinds of things. So we challenge austerity by that process. We unite people by that process. People say to me, well, your offer in the general election was largely an appeal to young people. I said, no, it was an appeal to everybody. Because if somebody wants to go to university and can get in, and they can't afford it, or too frightened of the idea of a 50,000 debt when they come out and therefore don't do it, two things happen. There are two results to that. One is that individual, that person, that young man or young woman has not got the degree they wanted, hasn't become the engineer they could have been, hasn't become the teacher they could have been, hasn't become whatever skill they wanted to develop in themselves. They lose out. We lose out because we haven't got the nurse, the engineer, or the skilled person within our society. It's all about investing in the community for the future. And I'm determined that we do that. So that's the offer we're going to put forward. It's about our approach, it's about our philosophy, it's about our attitudes. We live in a world that is environmentally challenged, to say the very least. We still have too many people a mentality that what you throw away doesn't matter because it will go somewhere else. It doesn't. It comes back to bite you. If you throw plastic in the sea, you pollute the sea. You cause the death of fish, or you cause pollution of the fish that people eat. There's an island, a massive island, a huge island in the Pacific made up of plastic waste that's been thrown from China, from Japan, from the USA and so on. Plastic waste in oceans has no nationality. It is plastic waste in oceans that shouldn't be there. And we have progress in the sense that international agreements on climate change, the Paris Climate Change Agreement, were important and a huge step forward. And we will build on that. We have better regulations on water quality, on air quality in this country than we've had in the past. But we're not anywhere like good enough. We need much tougher emission controls on vehicles. We might need much tougher water quality controls. We need much tougher pollution regulations altogether. So we will, yes, legislate to incorporate all European regulations within UK law. But I want to go further because it's up to us to protect our environment, not just for ourselves, but for everybody else in succeeding generations. And I tell you what, a Labour government would not be afraid to pick up the phone to Donald Trump on Paris Climate Change Accord and simply say, you are wrong. So it's the approach and the attitude that we take. Our party was founded out of the struggles of the 19th century. The struggles of people who had been disenfranchised from the land they'd occupied by the enclosure system of the mid-19th century, this massive movement of people from rural areas to industrial towns. And the trade unions grew out of that, both in the rural areas and in the urban areas. And our party grew out of the ideas, the socialist ideas of a society based on sharing, on justice and equality. A society based on the human values of all of us. And campaigned for democracy, the improvement in the right to vote, and the crucial campaign of the right of women to vote, which was finally won after the end of the First World War. We won those things, and by winning so many of those things, we eventually won some massive changes in our society. The National Health Service is, I believe, our greatest achievement. Healthcare, free, at the point of use for everybody. A human right for all. And I'm very proud of that. And next year will be the anniversary, the big anniversary of the founding of the National Health Service. Let's use that anniversary to celebrate what Anara and Bevan achieved, celebrate what our National Health Service achieved, but take it a stage further on mental health, on social care, on public health and public health policy altogether. That's what our party was founded to achieve. We achieved the Human Rights Act, the Equalities Act, equal pay legislation and a national minimum wage. All these things came about, not because somebody on high said what a great idea these things would be, but because of the movement of ordinary people to want to live in a collective and better society. That's not to remove the ability of the individual to express themselves. It's saying that if you care for everybody, society is stronger as a result of it. And so, since the party has grown so much in the past 2 years, our membership has gone up in the last, well, almost 3 years, 2.5 years, gone up from 200,000 now towards nearly 600,000 members. We're the largest political party in Western Europe, the largest socialist party, and by the vote we achieved in the general election, one of the most successful across Europe. But it's not enough. We've got to go further. Recruit people in who've been seduced in the wrong direction by UKIP or somebody else. Bring people in, explain to them that a society that works together and works for all does genuinely make a better place for us all to live in. I don't want my generation's political legacy to be the next generation of young people living in debt, difficulty of finding housing, being told to pay for their own health care, and by the way, you better start saving for a pension because nobody else is going to provide you one. I want us to be an exemplar of what can be achieved. But I also want us to use our creative imagination with our principles on how we deal with the new technologies coming down the line. Robot technology, high technology. I mentioned at the start the Industrial Revolution of the 19th century. That was the most brutal experience for the vast majority of working class communities all over Britain. And impoverishment happened for many of those people. The fight back came through unions and political parties. Let's not allow the fourth industrial revolution to be one which concentrates huge levels of wealth into those very powerful companies that control so much of high technology world. Can't we use the development of high technology to share and spread wealth rather than concentrate it in the hands of the few? You've come here tonight to listen to Billy Bragg and some music. So can I finish with this message to you? Thanks for all you do. Thanks for kindly inviting me here to North Devon. It won't be the only time I'll be here, I promise you that. Because we're taking our campaign for social justice all around the country. In the general election, it wasn't just door knocking and voter identification we did. It was that debate and that discussion online, on the bus, on the street, in the cafe. It was that discussion which people realised the world doesn't have to be the way the Tory party thinks it is. It doesn't have to be a world of great inequality and injustice. It can be a world that genuinely works for the good of all. That is why we're Labour. That is why we have these socialist values. That is why we have those ideas. And you know what? It's catching, it's infectious, and we're going to win. Thank you very much indeed. Billy, come on. Mark! Do you want to say a word, Mark?
Thank you.
The man!
I think they want more, Jeremy. I want.
Thank you.
That's amazing reception and thoroughly deserved. It's. I feel I've waited my entire political life to actually go out in this last general election that we fought a few months ago with a manifesto. We got a copy now, it's around. The manifesto, I thought, this is what I actually believe in. It's taken me so long to actually find that particular opportunity to go out on the doorstep around North Devon during that campaigning for those policies that Jeremy has set out the principles and the basis of this evening. Jeremy, I want to thank you again for coming to North Devon. It's been an interesting an interesting exercise in trying to get everybody together. We did it. And you coming tonight is a tribute not only to the appeal of what this party stands for, but also a tribute to you and the efforts that you put in to make this party, and will make this party, even more successful when we come to the next election. So Jeremy, thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much. And there's still more to come. Give us a short break and Billy will be with you.
Thank you all very much. Can we take the message? Tomorrow night I'm speaking to our comrades and friends in Scotland, in Edinburgh, and we're doing some campaign meetings there. The issues are not that different. Poverty, injustice, and a sense of hopelessness. We replace it with that. Can I take your greetings to Scotland tomorrow? Thank you very much!